Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur ki jai. So this morning, I thought it would be good to talk about Bhaktivedanta Thakur somewhat, and some recent developments where his birthplace is, but we'll get to that. So Bhaktivedanta Thakur, of course, is an extremely important figure in our Sampradaya. He was the one that actually began the process of spreading Krishna consciousness all around the world. He was writing English articles. There's a small booklet that he wrote in 1896, the year of Prabhupada's birth, about the philosophy and personality of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we'll read a little bit about that, and I'll see if we can get through all of this. But so I think, I didn't check this, I think that Bhaktivedanta Thakur was born in 1837, but I have to check that. But he was the main driving force in the setting up of the preaching movement. He himself would go to the villages in Bengal and Orissa, and they'd hold big programs. 5,000 to 10,000 people at the time would come, and this was prior to the dawn of the technological society. We have no recordings of Bhaktivedanta Thakur speaking or videos of him in life, but we have a few pictures, that's all. But he was very important because he was the one that started the process of spreading Krishna consciousness around the world through books. And we know, of course, that was the desire of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also, and now Srila Prabhupada. So there's been like a generational development of ISKCON, starting off with Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Before Bhaktivedanta Thakur, there was no preaching going on whatsoever, and Gaudiya Vaishnavism had been kind of split up in different ways. There were different opinions about the predictions that Bhaktivedanta Thakur made. So I'm going to read a little bit of an article here, and we'll talk a little bit about the events that have taken place in the last 3 or 4 years in our dealings with the committee that looks after Bhaktivedanta Thakur's birthplace. That's in a place called Birnagar, which is only about 50 minutes from Mayapur. So, anyway, in 1875, Bhaktivedanta Thakur, a great devotee in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya line, predicted in his magazine Sajantoshini in an article called Nityananda Suryodo that soon there will be a time when the chanting of Krishna's names will be heard in England, France, Russia, Germany and America. So that was in 1875, before Prabhupada's. But he very presciently predicted that some personality was going to come that would revive the Sankirtan movement that had been inaugurated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Haridas Thakur, and all the Lord's associates 500 years ago. But when he says here, soon there will be a time, because from Krishna's standpoint, now we're 500 years from when Lord Chaitanya appeared, but Prabhupada said this is the beginning of Lord Chaitanya's prediction being fulfilled. So 500 years is a lot to our vision, but from Krishna's point of view, or Lord Chaitanya's point of view, it's very quick flash in the time scale. So I think this is Prabhupada quoting here. In this regard, Bhaktivedanta Thakur wrote in his Sajjana Toshani in 1895 that Sriman Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya, did not descend with his associates to deliver a certain number of human beings in the land of India, but rather his purpose was to deliver and uplift all living beings in all countries of the world by practicing the eternal religion of all souls, was Sanatana Dhamma. In the same article, Bhaktivinoda questioned, when will that day come when all the greatly fortunate souls take up banners, drums, and hand cymbals and cause the ecstatic waves of Harinam Kirtan and the singing of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's holy name to rise in the streets of their own towns and villages. So he was expecting something was going to happen. It was a fortunate, if you like, time when Bhaktivinoda Thakur started to preach. Before that, of course, there was nothing going on. But this principle of Harinam Sankirtan being the religion of the world, that was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's attempt. And everything that we're doing in ISKCON, and there's so many Gaudiya mats also, has been formulated previously by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He's the one that started what we know to be the Sankirtan movement. So what all this means is that with his spiritual vision, Bhaktivinoda could see how the Sankirtan process will be taken in the near future to the Western countries, and indeed all over the planet. In fact, in 1875, Bhaktivinoda Thakur also predicted a personality will soon appear to preach the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and move unrestrictedly over the whole world with his message. So the question was who this could be. So as an answer to these prayers and predictions, on Nandotsava, the annual festival day celebrating Krishna's birth, in the year of 1896, there appeared His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, known as Srila Prabhupada to many. So it was Srila Prabhupada who grew up as a pure devotee, who would take the chanting of Hare Krishna around the world and make it a household word. So if we look at that prediction, because Prabhupada, when he first met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was immediately requested, why don't you're an educated young man, why don't you take this movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and help to spread it? You're educated, you speak English. That was one of the few things that the British did to benefit India. Most of what they did not. But the spread of the British Empire meant that English became the prominent language in the world. If you look on a map, you see where England is. It's a tiny little place compared to everywhere else. But according to the desire of Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he could see this is the right time because English had become the lingua franca for the whole of the world. Wherever you went, educated people were speaking English. So not blessings, if you like, but the most useful thing that the British did was give their language to the world. And Bhaktivedanta Thakur was aware of that, so he began to write in English, and then that developed from there. So on August the 12th, 1965, that's one day prior to Prabhupada's leaving India for the first time and going to the West. It seems like Prabhupada had done a little bit of PR work for his movement. He visited a Bengali newspaper, maybe other ones also, and he got them to print an article about his beginning his preaching work. So it's interesting what he says. This was written in the Dainik Basumati, which is a Bengali language newspaper in Calcutta. So it's a short article, but it had Prabhupada's picture, and it's clear that it was written, the article was written by Prabhupada himself, not the news people, news reporters. So there's a heading there, the Lord's message goes to America. And then in the text it says, Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Prativitaya Chajita Nagaradi Gram Sarvacha Prachahoi Beina Moranam. That prophecy is going to be fulfilled now. So this is Prabhupada on the verge of coming to the West, and he's very confidently saying it's going to happen now, which when you contrast that with certain other Gaudiya Math members, right from the 1930s they've been trying, but not really being successful. And then Prabhupada comes in this 1965 and very confidently makes that prediction. Very straightforward. This is the time. This is now the time when Bhaktivedanta Thakur's prediction will come true. So it's a short article. He says, Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami, a resident of Vrindavan, which is another. He didn't identify with being a resident of Calcutta. By the time Prabhupada was ready to go, he'd been living in Vrindavan for at least 8 or 9 years. So Prabhupada was fully identifying himself as a resident of Vrindavan. And it says he has translated the Srimad Bhagavatam into English in 60 volumes with word-for-word meaning and purports. Because at this point, Prabhupada had 3 volumes, just the first canto. But he's already saying that he's done 60 volumes. So Prabhupada knew how to, make the newspapers interested. And he says, before this great work could be appreciated by his countrymen, people from far off America have expressed their admiration for this supernormal achievement and have invited him so that he may meet in person and acquaint themselves with his work. Hence, he is departing from Calcutta for New York on this 12th day of August. It was actually the next day when the boat left. It was Friday the 13th. So I don't know about in India, but there's just this idea in the West that Friday the 13th, it's a kind of a disaster day. It's very unlucky, but actually Prabhupada left for America on that day. So we have to say that that's the most fortunate day. Nothing. So there's several things that Prabhupada says here, that before this great work could be appreciated by his countrymen, he was invited by people in America. So again, Prabhupada taking a little PR license, just tell people that although in India he couldn't make any headway with getting them interested, when he went to America, he said he was invited to go there. Not exactly an invitation, it was a gentleman that Prabhupada had met in Agra. What was it? Gopal Agarwal. Huh? Yes. So this man, he was living in America, and he had married an American lady. She's still around. Sometimes she still comes to our temples. And Prabhupada says that people from America have expressed their admiration of this supernormal achievement, because Prabhupada had not done anything yet compared to what ISKCON became. But and his only American contact, who had never met in person, Gopal Agarwal, had just sent him some papers. Prabhupada had met Gopal's father in Agra, and he said, I just casually mentioned that I want to go and preach this in the West. But then to his surprise, a few weeks later, he got the papers for getting a visa and traveling to America. And he himself said that he wasn't expecting to get anything. But just at that moment when he had finished the first canto, then this connection was made with Gopal Agarwal. So he was in America. He invited Prabhupada to stay with him for a month. And then Prabhupada was on his own. So we all know, of course, the story there, but it's interesting to see Prabhupada's perspective on it, that he says this supernormal achievement of translating the Bhagavatam. So it's not what we call in English bragging, but from Prabhupada's point of view, it was, a factual, objective statement. He's not saying this to boost his own ego. He's just letting people know that this is what's really going on. So Prabhupada, of course, left on the 13th of August, and for 10 years he preached Krishna Consciousness very successfully. And January the 17th, 1976, so this is 10 years later, Prabhupada was in Mayapur, and whilst he was giving his class, he referred the ISKCON movement back to Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So this was on the 17th of January, 76. Prabhupada entered the ground floor temple room and greeted the beautiful brass forms of Sri Sri Radha Madhav. Sri Shalagram Srila is also present, Mayapur being one of the few ISKCON temples in which Prabhupada has so far sanctioned his worship. So, of course, it's fairly common, the worship of Shalagram Srila, but generally in the proper lines, Brahminical lines. And Prabhupada, although he installed quite a number of devotees by this time, temples, sorry, not devotees, Shalagram Srila was still something that he was a bit reluctant to introduce, because he wanted to make sure that the pujaris were pure enough. It's very important. If you are worshipping Shalagram Srila, if you commit any offences, there's very severe reactions from that. So although you see them, they have to be looked after very carefully. And Prabhupada therefore was very cautious about introducing Shalagram Srila worship in ISKCON. But by about 75, 76, he started to do that. So after a lively Guru Puj, Prabhupada gave a short talk describing the benefits of life in the Holy Dham. He said it was Bhaktivedanta Thakur's aspiration that the Europeans, Americans and Indians all together dance jubilantly and chant Gaura Hari. So this temple, Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, is meant for the Transcendental United Nations. What the United Nations failed to do will be achieved here by the process recommended by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prithivya Jito Nagaradi Gram Sabatrapa Chahoive Moranam. So you have come from all parts of the world. There are devotees starting to come in. And of course, in those days, most of the devotees in ISKCON in India were actually Westerners. He had a few good men from the Indian community, but at that point it was the Westerners that he was depending upon. And he was noting here that it's very nice that all the different devotees from around the world have come here to Chaitanya Chandrodaya Mandir just to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. So he said that is the greatest achievement in this movement, that everyone forgets the bodily conception of life. Nobody here thinks of themselves as European, American, Indian, Christian, Muslim, Hindu. They forget all these designations and simply they're ecstatic in chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So kindly, what you have begun, do not break it. Continue it very jubilantly, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the master of Mayapur, he will be very much pleased upon you, and ultimately you'll go back home, back to Godhead. So that was Prabhupada's arrival speech in Mayapur in 1976. And he makes that point that nobody here thinks in bodily terms. What we're doing is meant for any entity, living entity, and is equally beneficial, no matter who we are or what culture we came from, what country we were born in, etc. So Prabhupada stayed for 2 months in Mayapur in 76, and on February the 20th, that was the appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So Prabhupada, we had a special program for that. And Prabhupada took an early massage, and then he went down into the temple room at about 11 o'clock and offered his obeisances to a large painting of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that had been placed on the Vyasasana. So instead of Prabhupada getting on the Vyasasana as he normally did, he had his Guru Maharaj's picture placed there, and Prabhupada sat down on the floor on a thin mat. Prabhupada seemed very satisfied to see the beautiful decorations. There were long multicolored drapes hung across the back wall, as well as strands of marigolds draped around the Vyasasana, and banana trees and leaves were placed all around. Moving to the front of the Vyasasana area, Prabhupada sat comfortably on an asana on the floor with his back to the Jollywood fence. Achyutananda Swami sang songs glorifying Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, notably O.A. Vaishnava Thakur. Then afterwards, Prabhupada gave a wonderful lecture requesting the devotees to do 2 things: help to develop Mayapur and distribute many books. So that was Prabhupada's main preaching effort. He wanted us to sell as many books as possible and develop Mayapur. So that's now finally happening with the building of the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. But Prabhupada had been talking about that all along, about developing Mayapur and having a city of 50,000 Vaishnavas living in that area. I'm not sure exactly how we can fit 50,000 residents into our current Mayapur scheme, but that was Prabhupada's desire, so at some point it's going to be done. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was the son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur had rediscovered this birth site of Lord Chaitanya, and it was his attempt to develop it. This is Prabhupada speaking. Then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur continued the effort, and now he and his godbrothers were also doing what they could. Means our Prabhupada, he was doing his bit. His godbrothers, they've got several temples down the road from where we are. So he said, we've got a great ambition to develop this place nicely and gloriously. Unfortunately, we are now connected with foreign countries, especially with the Americans. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's great desire was that the Americans would come here and develop this place, and they would chant and dance along with the Indians. So from this place, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started his movement, and he desired that as many towns and villages as there are, this Krishna Consciousness movement should be spread. So this Krishna Consciousness movement is now in your hands. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wanted me to do something in this connection. He wanted from all of his disciples actually, but especially he stressed many times that you do this. Whatever you have learned, you try to expand in the English language. So there's an important statement there that Prabhupada is saying that Bhaktisiddhanta wanted to do something, and he actually wanted it to be done by all of his disciples. So if we look at what happened, Prabhupada was also specifically instructed to preach in the English language, but it's not that he was that instruction was only given to Srila Prabhupada. There were, in the Gaudiya Math, there was a build-up going on from the time that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur really started his preaching movement. Because he has sat down in Mayapur for many years just chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. He took a vow to chant 1 billion names. This was his build-up to the preaching that was to come. So gradually he attracted one or two men. They moved their preaching effort to Calcutta, and they started preaching. And this Sajan Taushani, which was a Bengali magazine, in 1927 that was changed into an English language publication. So that was a further statement of intention by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that they were on the verge of fulfilling this prediction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That the Gaudiya Math, they started publishing English literature, and I think in 1935 they built the Yogpit temple. That was discovered by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of course, I think in 1887. I have to check that. But the land at least was identified, but it seems like not much building was going on until the 1930s, when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati took over the running of that mat and started this English preaching. So he had picked 3 disciples that would go to England in the 1930s. Sambhidananda was one of them, Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha was another one, and Ban Maharaj was the third one. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was paying or sending about 700 rupees a month to England to support these men whilst they started their preaching. And in those days, of course, that was a lot of money. But it shows you the commitment that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had to fulfill the predictions of his father and spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. So everybody knew it was a request, it was an ambition that the whole membership of the Gaudiya Mat had to somehow or another fulfill this prediction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it was a general instruction that anybody could take up, but it was also specifically requested from Prabhupada when he met his Guru Maharaj, right from 1922, and then again in 1936, that this is your mission. So it was an open field that, for the Gaudiya Mat to begin this kind of preaching, but Srila Prabhupada was the one who specifically did it. So in 1976, 10, 11 years after he started, things have been going beyond Prabhupada. Prabhupada said it went beyond his own understanding how this movement spread all over the world so quickly. And Prabhupada's ambition was to have a big temple in Mayapur. So this Temple of the Vedic Planetarium, when Prabhupada got his first piece of land in 1971 in Mayapur, then he immediately drew up plans they were made into a model, and Prabhupada had a plan to build a temple 100 feet high. It looked a little bit like a pyramid, but then along with that he wanted to have 4 guest houses, and his idea, as he said, was to bring people from all over the world to Mayapur and read and study Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy and movement. So early 72, Prabhupada was already having meetings and trying to get interest in developing Mayapur. He had this model built. There's a couple of pictures of Prabhupada next to that. He was holding a fundraising drive for it. And Prabhupada's intention, of course, was, as I say, to have a big city. His godbrothers had already built a few temples there, which Prabhupada recognized. But he had ambitions. And he mentions the Americans especially were helping. So Prabhupada wrote and told the managers at this time that you should do something wonderful, otherwise what's the use of being American? Yeah. He didn't want us to build something which is like, the same as hundreds or even thousands of temples already in India. They're already there. So Prabhupada was telling his disciples, what's the use of my being the guru of the Americans if you don't do something wonderful? So he was prodding us, go out and collect the money and build this Mayapur city. When Prabhupada first came back to to India, to start ISKCON's activities in America, then he brought with him four sannyasis, new sannyasis. He got this piece of land in 1971, and then he started to develop his ideas. So by 1976, because we had an increasingly big Mayapur festival, maybe 500 or 600 foreign devotees came in 1976, and Prabhupada was very pleased with the developments. But there was a morning walk on February the 3rd. Prabhupada was inspecting the land that he had, and by that time, ISKCON had about 25 acres of land, and sometimes Prabhupada would take a walk around the grounds, sometimes he would go on the roof. But he got one building, the Lotus building, that was the first. It was supposed to be a guest house. There were going to be 4 of those, and once the first one was done, then he moved the deities into the ground floor there. And for some time that was the Mayapur temple. So Prabhupada was very happy to see a lot of people were coming. On Gopurnima Day that year, he called me into his room and he asked me how many people were coming to the temple. So I went down to the front gate and I found out that there were so many people trying to enter that the police had to keep closing the gates and let people in batches because there was too many people. So when Prabhupada heard that, he was extremely happy, you can imagine. So he told us that was his ambition, but he never actually thought it could be, so successful. So he walked down on the grounds, he went to the front of our land, he wanted to inspect the progress of the new building. So when we arrived there, he'd also told the devotees, now we have sufficient land. He said, you build another bigger building. So that's what we call the long building. When we constructed it, I don't know whether it's still so, but in those days it was the longest building in West Bengal. So Prabhupada was very happy with that. So he'd gone down to have a look at the new building construction. And when he was there, he questioned Jayapataka Swami about the Sri Chaitanya Gaudiya Math. They have erected a new building at the gateway of their property, which is meant to house a deity of Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur, the father of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master. Prabhupada was not at all happy to hear about this development. He felt that they were going over the head of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had lived there for many years, but Prabhupada said he had never contemplated such a thing. So when you go now, as you enter the Yog Pit on the right, there's a small temple and a murti of Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So Prabhupada didn't like that they did that. He said that he was such a prominent acharya, and now they're pushing him away in some pocket there. So Prabhupada told Jayapataka that he should have challenged them, that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati could not understand where Bhaktivedanta Thakur should be placed, but you have understood. You were so intelligent. You were over-intelligent. So that means rascals. Over-intelligent means rascal. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he remained so many years and he could not understand, but you have understood to make Bhaktivedanta Thakur a gatekeeper. So he wasn't at all happy. He said he should have built a big temple recognizing, but they've made him a gatekeeper. So he told Jayapataka, you tell him next time when you go, you are over-intelligent. So there's a bit of competition going on in Mayapur between Prabhupada and his godbrothers. Prabhupada was pushing us that, as I say, you call yourself Americans, but that means you should do something wonderful. What's the use of having Americans if you don't do something special? So he was keen to take up the challenge of building this Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir, and he developed the idea of having this Vedic cosmology on display inside the temple. So it would be the temple of the Vedic planetarium. So right now we're about 3/4 through building the temple. All the interior construction work has been done. Jayapataka Maharaj is heading up a team to develop the exhibits that we want to put in the temple. Prabhupada wanted people from all over the world, but especially educated people, to come and see the Vedic view of the universe, because the current world view, of course, is mechanistic. Means that everything just happened by chance. Consciousness is a byproduct, a chance byproduct of matter. Ultimately, all there is just matter and nothing else. So the Mayavadi idea. So Prabhupada wanted to break that and introduce people to the personal view of the universe. Life on all planets, life comes from life, etc. So from the very beginning he wanted us to have this combination of a temple and a planetarium. So, let me see, okay. So, when Prabhupada came back to India in 1971, he went to the he went to Mayapur, and on March the 2nd of 1971, Prabhupada met with the younger brother of his Guru Maharaj, Lalit Prasad Thakur. He's also a great devotee. Interestingly, when Prabhupada went to Russia, he went to Moscow in 1971. Whilst he was there in the hotel in Moscow, he hand wrote a Bengali letter to Lalit Prasad Thakur, telling him that now I'm writing this from Moscow, and he gave a list of 3 things that he was going to discuss with this Professor Kutovsky, who had sent him an original invite. As it turned out, of course, Prabhupada was only able to meet with this professor one time, and then they had 4 or 5 days just kind of on their own. Just this last month, Prabhupada's secretary of that time, Shyama Prabhu, he's put out a very thick volume about his traveling with Srila Prabhupada. In the second volume, he mentions this trip to Birnagar, where Bhaktivedanta Thakur was born and where his son was resident in the ashram. So Prabhupada at that time, he had requested Lalit Prasad Thakur to lease or even give some of the land that they had in Birnagar, where the birth site of Bhaktivedanta Thakur is there. So they had some talks, but nothing really came of it. Prabhupada went on to Mayapur, and then after some time, the devotees, there was a committee that was running the Birnagar temple, and the Lalit Prasad Thakur, I think he was 96 at that time. So he had nothing to do with the management, but he liked the idea that some of that land should come to ISKCON. But the committee that he had running everything were very wary, so they didn't do anything to facilitate that. So again in 1976, 4 years later, at the end of the Mayapur festival, then Prabhupada decided on the way to Calcutta, he'd go and visit Lalit Prasad Thakur again and talk to him again about ISKCON getting involved with the birth site of Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So Jayapataka Maharaj was instructed during the walk to arrange a meeting with Sri Lalit Prasad Thakur, who is the only remaining brother of Srila Prabhupada's Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Prabhupada wanted to meet with him on his way to Calcutta. So apparently Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had some difference of opinion with Lalit Prasad. Lalit Prasad is a Babaji, a member of the class of reclusive devotees who remain aloof from the general population and simply chant the Maha Mantra. His brother, on the other hand, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, was a sannyasi, an active preacher who created a large movement and He was an active preacher who created a large movement and attracted much opposition in the process. Apparently, Lalit Prasad considers himself to be more confidentially situated in his relationship with the previous acharyas and Krishna. So he was at odds very often with his brother, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and there was a kind of a split in their ranks. Bhaktisiddhanta wanted to preach and spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. Bhaktivedanta Thakur had predicted it, but this brother, Lalit Prasad, who had control over the birthplace of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was not in favour of his brother's work. So there's some conflict was there that naturally carried down into ISKCON and even other Gaudiya mats, and there was some kind of a rift there. But still Prabhupada wanted to actually do some preaching there. And they have about 5 acres of land. And there's one small temple which was built on the spot where Bhaktivinoda Thakur was born. And that was shown to Lalit Prasad Thakur by Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself. So that's authentic. And to one side on that land there, there's what they call the Dwadasa Mandir. And that was constructed in 1818, which is exactly 200 years ago. And at that time, the family of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they were all Durga worshippers, Kali worshippers. And they had constructed this Dwadasa Mandir. There were 11 small buildings, like you've seen these Buddhist stupas. They're about that size, about 8 feet high. And in each one, there was a Shiva Lingam. So they were in a semicircle, and then at the far end of it, there was a 2-story building. And they'd installed, I think, Durga in that place. And then next to that compound, there was another larger temple, and that was a Kali worshipping temple. So that was all built by Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, I guess his father or his uncle. And it was used for some time. Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself was sent to Calcutta. Whilst he was in Calcutta for studying, then this epidemic, I think it was cholera, struck Birnagar, the whole city, and many thousands of people died in that epidemic. And whereas Bhaktivinoda Thakur's uncle and relatives were quite wealthy up till that point, because of the disease and people dying, so many people dying, they became impoverished. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was sent to his relatives in Calcutta, and later on, of course, he went to Orissa as well. But that was basically the end of Birnagar at that time. But later on, Lalit Prasad, by some arrangement with the government, he got back some of the land from that estate of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's relatives. So they're worshipping there. Of course, all the Shiva Lingams have been removed. There's only one left now on site. And in the 2-story building on the top floor, there's deities of Radha Madhav. So he's got something there. And Prabhupada wanted to work with them and establish an ISKCON temple there, with the idea that it would attract many foreign devotees. Naturally, they would give money, so they'd be able to support the temple there. And it was only 50 minutes from Mayapur, so it was easy to get to. So Prabhupada, made this proposal. But Lalit Prasad's committee didn't like it. They were afraid, this is some kind of takeover bid or whatever. So at that time, nothing was finalized. This was in 72. So again, in 1976, then Prabhupada wanted to visit Birnagar again. And at that time, I had become Prabhupada's servant, so I also got a chance to go there. And they met for about 2 hours. And then we left, and again, negotiations were going on, and again, the same result. They were very wary of us and didn't want ISKCON to be involved. But a further problem developed in terms of the sadhana that they were teaching there at Biyanagar. Because we have our program, and ISKCON is all about preaching. But the occupants of Biyanagar, they have this sort of Babaji idea, I think they call it Siddhadeya, where you're supposed to just sit and chant, and that's your only occupation, chant 64 rounds a day. And the Babajis, they tell you that if you don't chant 64 rounds a day, you can't go back to Godhead. So they preach, so-called preach it, and they don't do anything else. No preaching, no consideration for others, but just become a confidential servant of Lord Chaitanya by chanting 64 rounds a day. So once our Western devotees started coming over to India, they took an interest naturally in Bhaktivedanta Thakur's birth site place there. But Lalit Prasad Thakur, he began reinitiating some of Prabhupada's disciples and introducing them to this Siddhadeya principle. They do some, Astakali Lila meditation. Krishna has different activities at different times of the day. So according to this Babaji practice, you're supposed to sit and chant 64 rounds and meditate on the pastimes of Krishna according to what time of the day it is. So somehow or another, some of Prabhupada's disciples got beguiled by that, stopped preaching and started chanting 64 rounds. And basically, just staying they would write to, I saw one letter written to Lalit Prasad by one of Prabhupada's early sannyasi disciples. And he described there, yes, I'm chanting 64 rounds, but now I have to do some preaching work. Prabhupada wants me to go and do some management. So it means now that I can't do all my rounds. So he eventually left because he wanted to chant 64 rounds. He didn't want to preach. So this is a kind of a poison that was coming into ISKCON at that time, mainly by foolish disciples who were immature and didn't realize, what the effects would be on themselves and on the ISKCON society. So Prabhupada just told the devotees, don't go there anymore. If that's what they're doing, then none of my disciples should go there. So we stopped going. And although Biyanagar is very close to Mayapur, it's only 50 minutes, practically you won't find anybody in ISKCON that knows where it is. But in 2013, when we were developing this new library in Calcutta, we were collecting different manuscripts and old books. So we knew that there were some manuscripts, original manuscripts at Biyanagar that had been written by Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Actually in 1972, some of the devotees, Achyutananda Swami, he had gone to Biyanagar. That was when we were still friends. And he'd seen their library. So they had quite a number of original handwritten manuscripts by Bhaktivedanta Thakur, but they were kind of rotting away. They had no idea how to preserve them. They were just keeping them in an almirah, so they were getting rotted away. So Achyutananda wrote to Prabhupada that this is the situation. And so Prabhupada immediately wrote back to him that I want you to collect, or at least photograph, as many of those manuscripts as possible. He said people, when they see the actual handwriting of such great saints, they'll make progress in their spiritual life just by seeing the handwritings. So Prabhupada immediately wrote to Sauri Prabhu. He was an early recruit in India and a professional photographer. and filmmaker. So Prabhupada asked him, you go immediately to Birnagar and photograph all these manuscripts, as many as possible. So he went there, and for 1 week things went well. He took some hundreds of photographs. We do still have that film in the Prabhupada's archives in North Carolina. But he was not able to do all of the works. And then he left there and never went back. He told me later on the reason why he left was because, again, this soliciting was going on, that, your Guru Maharaj is not giving you everything. You have to take up this Babaji style. And so it was disappointing, and Yadabara left. He didn't like to be, subjected to that soliciting. So that was 1972. So in 2013, we'd already built, we're running this library that we have now in Calcutta, the Bhaktivedanta Research Center. And I've been thinking for some time about, how to get into Birnagar. We've been advised by even some Gaudiya Math members that the Birnagar committee, they're not friendly to, anybody in line from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. They follow Lalit Prasad. So they were not very willing to allow people from, our wing of Gaudiya Vaishnavism to come there. But Prabhupada, made the suggestion in 72 and again in 76. And then I found these letters Prabhupada wrote to Achyutananda and Yadabara, and somehow or another I just got the idea that I should just go there and visit and see what's going on. And it just happened that our devotees in Mayapur, they'd hired a bus and they were going to Birnagar to do Nam Sankirtan. And so there was a couple of seats left. So I thought, well, why not go and see? I haven't been there since 1976. Maybe things have changed. So I just jumped on the bus and went with them. When we landed in Birnagar, there was one young man who was, he'd organized a small pandal for the ISKCON devotees, and everybody went on Sankirtan around Birnagar. I stayed back because I had a problem with my knee. So I was chatting to this young man, and I told him I was in Birnagar in 76 with Prabhupada. And I asked him, do you know exactly where Bhaktivinoda Thakur's birthplace is? And he said, sure, it's just around the corner. So it turned out this boy, actually, he's initiated by one of the Babajis in Birnagar, but he was very attracted to ISKCON. So I asked him, can we go there and see it? So he was very happy to take me around. The first person we bumped into when we got there was this small Bengali Babaji. What was his name? Bamsi Das Babaji. And he was kind of in charge of the committee there. And contrary to what I'd been told several times prior, that they would be, not very happy to see us, it was completely opposite. As soon as I walked on the land, Bhamsidas Babaji came over. He was very friendly. He took me around, the birthplace and the Dwadas Mandir, and showed me the grounds that they got. And he was just generally very, very friendly. So I thought, well, this is an opportunity. So I told him that I had heard that you have some original handwritten manuscripts by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So he said, yes. So I asked him, do you think I could see them? So he said, okay, sure. So he went off. 5 minutes later, he came back with one book. It was a printed book, not handwritten, but it was literally falling apart. It had wormholes all over it, and it was a handwritten version of Chaitanya Bhagavat. Bhaktivedanta Thakur had handwritten it all down. So they're, letting it just sit there and rot away. So I told him, I said, Maharaj, I said, in 10 or 20 years, there's going to be nothing left of your library because the bugs will have eaten them. And he said, yeah, he said, I know, we should try and get them scanned or something. So he knew about scanning. So I told him, I said, we've got this library that we've just built in Calcutta, and we have professional scanning machine. So, to help you look after the works, if you like, we can take all your library to Calcutta. We'll, treat them so that they don't deteriorate anymore, and we'll make scans of everything. So he had to consult with his committee, the Bhaktivedanta Goshti, and I met with them about a month after Gaur-Purnima, and I was being optimistic because Prabhupada had been refused twice before to do something there. So, but I was trying to be optimistic, and so I wrote an agreement between the Bhaktivedanta Research Center and the Bhaktivedanta Goshti that we could take the works of Bhaktivedanta Thakur to Calcutta. We can treat them with, there's some chemicals they use. You deacidify the paper first, and then you laminate it with a special kind of acid-free paper. So I told him, we'll make a catalogue. He didn't even know what he had. They were just there in the Almira. So I told him, we'll make a proper catalogue. Then we'll do this preservation work. Then we'll do the scanning. Then we'll rebind all the books, because if you scan something, you have to break the spine. And then when all that's finished and they're newly bound, we'll bring in all the originals back to you, back to Biyanagar. So he was very happy with that and kind of encouraged me, we'd like to do something like that. So the next day I was thinking, now we've got an opportune time. So I rang up Bamsidas Babaji and I said, Maharaj, I want you to come and see the library in Calcutta. I've sent you a taxi from Mayapur. They'll be arriving at such and such a time and they'll bring you there. So I didn't ask, I just sent the taxi, and so he jumped in. They brought him to Calcutta, and we had, there's about 6 photographs of Srila Prabhupada speaking with Lalit Prasad Thakur from that 1972 meeting. So when we walked into the library with Bamsidas Babaji, I had got the photographs up on the computer screen because he'd never seen them before. He was a disciple of Lalit Prasad. So the first thing I did was show him the photographs. Prabhupada and Lalit Prasad were laughing and talking together. So that kind of softened him up. And then we showed him around the library. And the library that we've got actually is probably the most important library on the planet at the moment, because it was the original library of the Gaudiya Mat Bagbazar temple in Calcutta. In the 1930s, one of the disciples of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, what was his name? Can't hear you. So, somebody say something. This is my affliction nowadays. I get stuck. Sundarananda Vijayavinod. I knew we'd get it. Sundarananda Vijayavinod was a Sanskrit professor that joined Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's Gaudiya movement in the 1920s. He was teaching Sanskrit in Dhaka. So he met some of the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta. Then he came to Calcutta and met Bhaktisiddhanta personally. So he took initiation, Sundarananda. And he was the custodian of the library. He actually built it up because he was a scholar. In 1937, when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati left the planet, then there was an immediate conflict within the ranks of the Gaudiya Math. I mean, within weeks, they were fighting and arguing, and it got quite tense. People bringing court cases, one temple against the other. We were told that the library in Bag Bazaar Mutt had been raided during the night, and some of the books had been stolen. So there was, a lot of nonsense going on. So Sundarananda Vijay Vinod, as the custodian of the library, he simply put his rubber stamp on every book in the library and took them home. He removed them from the Gaudiya Math so that nothing could happen to them. So they were sitting in his house up until 2009. He himself left the planet in the 1960s, and so his sons had kept all of his library intact. But again, the same thing, they were subject to humidity, to heat, to bugs, so many things. And they're just rotting away in these almirahs. So when we contacted his son, after some years he agreed that he would give the whole library to ISKCON. And what happened was, in 2009, we had found out about this library of books. It's virtually the personal library of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So we had been, one of our devotees who was doing his PhD on Gaudiya Vaishnavism, he found out about that collection, and he went to, via a third party, he started negotiating with them to try to get the whole library of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So eventually they agreed. We, at that time, had started our Bhaktivedanta Research Center, and we were really keen, to get this library of Sundarananda's. So we did some negotiation with them, and we settled on a price of 7 lakhs to buy the whole library. But then the week that we were supposed to complete the deal, we'd already kind of constructed the library. That was nice. And then the week that we were supposed to settle the deal with the Sundarananda relatives, they instead gave the whole collection for free to one of the Gopinath Gaudiya Math. What's his name? Bodhian Maharaj. He's the acharya there. So it looked like it had slipped through our fingers that we couldn't have it, and it had gone to the Gopinath Gaudiya Math. But I met with their acharya there, Bodhian Maharaj, and this devotee that was the scholar, his name is Pranava from Sweden. He also knew him. So we contacted him, and he said, all right, I'm on tour right now, but when I come back for Karatik, then we'll talk about it. So a couple of months later, he came back to Mayapur, and he did an amazing thing. When we came to see him, we sat down, and he said, look, when you rang me about you and told me about the library that you've made, he said, I took it that it was Lord Chaitanya ringing. Yeah, he said, so we've got all these books, they're all packed away in boxes. We got them from the family, they gave them to our mat, but we don't have any room to put them. We have no space. So you take the whole collection and keep them in your library in Calcutta. And whenever we need one of the books, you can print a copy for us, we'll be happy. So he gave us the entire collection. That was really Krishna's arrangement. And I think altogether there's about 180 manuscripts and old books. So we took him to Calcutta the next day. As soon as he said it, Bhariya Maharaj, he looked in the Panjika to find an auspicious day to make the transfer. And it was, I think, two days after we met him. It was the beginning of Kartik. So he calculated between 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock in the morning, you can, take all the collection. So we turned up with a 40-seater bus, and we filled the whole bus with boxes. And then we left and took them to Calcutta. So that's still there. That's the core of our, library. There's, I think now about 3,000 important documents, amazing stuff that we never expected to find. There's a personal diary that was being kept by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada from 1904 to 1936. Some of it's typed, most of it's typed up, but there were some handwritten sections. And there was the last will of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati that was written on the 31st of December 1936. He left his body on the first day of January, early in the morning. So before leaving, he dictated about 10 or 12 points that he wanted in his will. And the second item was that the Gaudiya members should form a GBC so that they can manage the movement. And there was, of course, one of the main managers, or the main manager in the Gaudiya in Bhaktisiddhanta's time, was this Kunja Babu, who later on became Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and he took over the running of the Yog Pit. So they were loggerheads from the Yog Pit. The devotees there were, basically became enemy number one to the Bag Bazaar crew. So anyway, it was a mess, and things got scattered. So now in 2009, all this treasure house, Prabhupada himself called it a treasure house of Vedic knowledge. So we got it. We got the whole collection. It's still there, and we've got much better relationships with some of the Gaudiya members now, because we're kind of found a common platform to meet on. So anyway, they were very happy. So they got this. We got this library. There's a handwritten songbook by Bhaktivedanta Thakur, all that, like Kirtan, Arati, Sarira Vijayadal, the Prasadam song. There's about 25 handwritten articles by Bhaktivedanta Thakur, including his own songbook. So, it was just an amazing find. We never expected that to get anything, and there was all these important papers. There was also a letter that Prabhupada wrote when he was in Moscow in 1971. He sent Lalit Prasad Thakur a letter from the hotel in Moscow. So we got that. Because it was in Bengali, it had been overlooked. When our archives, Prabhupada's archives, was set up, they collected all the correspondence that Prabhupada had with, thousands of disciples. But we'd never seen this letter from Prabhupada to Lalit Prasad, sent from Moscow. So now everything's there, it's all been preserved. We've got scholars in now, they're working on various aspects to do with the literature, And as I say, this is the most important collection because it has all handwritten stuff by Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So we were very happy. And if any of you are going to Mayapur, take a day in Calcutta. Nowadays there's a lot going on there. The devotees about 4 years ago purchased the same house where Prabhupada met with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It's still there, and of course it's crumbling a bit. It's an old place, but somehow or another they found out that it was still existent. They approached the owners. We bought that land, and now very shortly they're going to start renovating it. So we've got Prabhupada's birthplace, and we've got the place where I met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and what else have we got? Then there's the Radha Govinda temple where Prabhupada used to go as a child. So the devotees in Calcutta, they've made a kind of a Calcutta tour. And if you go to Calcutta, you can get in touch with them. They'll arrange for a bus and they go and visit all these different places in Calcutta. So anyway, we've got this really important literature of Bhaktivedanta Thakur's. We've got a good relationship with the committee that runs the Biyanagar temple, and at some point soon, myself and Jayapataka Maharaj are going to meet with, I hope we're going to meet with the members of the Gaudiya Mat and chalk out some plan. The members of the Bhaktivedanta Gosti. We want to meet with them and see if we can get the other half of the land. There's one half which is just trees and scrub. The other half is where the temples are. So what we'd like to do is to get either a lease or occupancy of some kind, so that we can build an ISKCON center there on the other part of the land. And that will be another important monument for the Gaudiya Vaishnava community. And if we do it, we can build a much nicer temple there and properly house Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So, back to 1976, the visit to Biyanagar. So we left Mayapur early in the morning and we drove to Biyanagar. We stopped off at the ashram of Lalit Prasad, the brother of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. As the last remaining son of Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he's very old, he was 96 at that time, but still completely alert. His ashram consists of a small temple and a few red brick dwellings, none of which are well maintained. Prabhupada talked for some time with him and some of his management committee. They discussed the plans that Prabhupada had for development of Bhaktivedanta Thakur's birth site. Nothing conclusive was arrived at, however, and we all took prasadam before we left. Prabhupada with Lalit Prasad, and we disciples with the local devotees of the ashram. So that's a little something about Bhaktivedanta Thakur's birth and place where he was residing. So now we'll have a look at a few songs, because Bhaktivedanta Thakur wrote scores of songs. I think he wrote over 100 books, and many of them were in the form of songs. And Prabhupada used to preach a lot by citing Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So we'll have a look and see a few of those. So this was in October 29th, 1976, in Vrindavan. So Prabhupada was giving a Srimad Bhagavatam class from the 5th canto, 5th chapter, And Prabhupada comments, this is very instructive. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs are very instructive and simple. Ultimately, Prabhupada said, we have to realize that working for individual self-interest offers no satisfaction. Prabhupada alluded to a significant event in his own life that had helped him to turn fully towards spiritual pursuits. He said, as soon as you see that it is all useless, sahasa vipaschit, that is actually enlightenment. As soon as we find, by the guidance of bona fide spiritual masters, by the guidance of Krishna personally, and as soon as we come to this understanding that we are simply wasting our time, means materially, then Shrama eva hi kevalam. In the beginning, when I understood what this one song of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Maya Jale Badahoye Acho Miche Kaj Loye. You have to excuse my pronunciation of Bengali. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, many times he has said, Maya Boche Jacho Beshi Kacho Habu Dubu Bai. Jiv Krishna Das Vishvash Kole To Dukonai. Oh brothers, needlessly under the control of Maya, you are suffering and are being carried away by her waves. So sometimes floating, sometimes sinking in this ocean of illusion. If you have this faith that the soul is the eternal servant of Krishna, then there will be no more misery. So this is very instructive. Back to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs. They're very nicely constructed, instructive, and simple. So Prabhupada knew a lot of the songs, and of course there's many recordings of Prabhupada singing Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs. So another occasion on the 25th of March, 1976, I think we were in Delhi at that time. Again, Prabhupada was on a morning walk, and he took an easy walk up and down the grass reserve of the front street. We were staying at that time at the house of a gentleman called Lakshman Agarwal. Some of the older members may remember there was a light bulb company called Lakshman Sylvania. I think they went bankrupt later on. But that fellow, Mr. Agarwal, he was very nice and a big supporter of Prabhupada. So when Prabhupada came to Delhi from Mayapur, and before we went to Vrindavan for the second half of the festival, we did 2 or 3 days programs at Mr. Agarwal's house. That's in Chanakapuri, which is the rich area of Delhi. So Prabhupada, as he always did, took a morning walk up and down the grass verge at the front of the street, and he answered a few questions from the small group of devotees that accompanied him. Gurudas Swami, Atraya Rishi, Chayavana, Pushta Krishna, Gopal Krishna, Yadabara, and myself were all on the morning walk. So Yadabara made a query as to why devotees get sick if sickness is a punishment for those who violate God's laws. So we can understand they get punished for doing something wrong, but it appears that even devotees who are not doing anything wrong also become ill and suffer, disease and so many things. So why is that? So Prabhupada's answer was frank. He said, devotees, to become a devotee is not so cheap a thing. You don't think that because you have got tilak that you have become a devotee. Why do you think that? Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he has sung, Eta Eka Kalir Chala, Nake Tilak Galaya Mala. Here is another follower of Kali. He's got tilak and mala. So just having a show of holding beads and putting tilak on doesn't make you spiritually advanced. It doesn't make you an associate of Krishna. So Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he's singing here that he is worshipping bhajan and taking another's wife. Here is the servant of Kali. So Prabhupada, when he lived in Vrindavan, of course, he knew what was going on in many places. You see that some of these so-called Babajis, they're simply begging chapatis. They're having affairs with the, the widows. Vrindavan has become something of a kind of dumping ground for widows. Even the Kami newspapers have been writing about it, that when some lady, husband dies, the relatives take her and drop her off in Vrindavan, Haribol, and then just leave her to fend for herself because they don't want to spend any more money on maintaining them. So this has become an unfortunate feature of Vrindavan life. But Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he's writing about that also. Same thing. You see this man with tilak and neck beads, Kali Chela. He's a follower of Kali. So simply he's changed his dress with tilak and mala. So if you take the tilak and mala and still do nonsense things, then you are not a devotee. You are Kali Chela. To become a devotee is not so easy a thing. So Atraya Rishi said, devotee means perfect. Prabhupada said, yes, certainly. Devotee means that he's above these material laws. That is a devotee. Brahma Bhuya Kalpate. He is in the Brahman stage. So that is a devotee. That means these sahajas, because I've got tilak and mala and I've become a devotee. So this kind of cheating will not do. So Prabhupada spent a lot of time stressing, especially after he opened our Vrindavan temple. He knew that now all these devotees from around the world, they're innocent in a lot of ways. They don't understand the Indian culture and how it works. So they're going to be, at risk. And in fact, there were a number of Prabhupada's disciples that got mixed up with some of the Babajis at Radhakund, and they gave up their practice and their initiation from Prabhupada and, went elsewhere. So Prabhupada knew that this was going to happen, and therefore practically the whole time whenever we visited Vrindavan, he would warn us, don't mix with the Babajis. Stay in our own temple, do your preaching, as I've shown you, but don't get involved with these Babajis because your whole spiritual life will be ruined if you do. So Prabhupada's in Vrindavan, this was September the 7th, 1976. This was right in the middle of the desertion of another member of Prabhupada's personal party, Nitai Das. Nitai was, I mentioned last night, I think, he was Prabhupada's Sanskrit editor and Bengali also, he was learning. He mixed with the Babajis, got spoiled, and then by early September the news came that he's left ISKCON. And there was a whole thing there about, the various criticisms that he had of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Srila Prabhupada, etc. So there was a bit of stuff going on, and therefore Prabhupada responded in his classes, not sometimes directly, but indirectly. He would explain that don't follow these bogus people and stick with the principles. So Prabhupada opened up his half-hour lecture with a warning about the dangers of hearing from the Mayavadis. He condemned their idea that the Bhagavatam was written by somebody called Bhopadev. And he said that even Shankaracharya could not comment on the Bhagavatam. He wrote comments on Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada said, but he could not touch the Srimad Bhagavatam because the Srimad Bhagavatam, the things are so nicely set up, Kritvanu Kramya, that it is not possible for the Mayavadis to prove that God is impersonal. From the Gita, and you can twist it around, but you can't do that with the Bhagavatam. Yeah, there's just no way that you can prove that God is a non-entity as the Mayavadis do. Nowadays, he said they're reading the Bhagavatam in their own way, but that does not appeal to any sane man. Sometimes I've seen a big Mayavadi explaining one verse from the Bhagavatam, that because you were God, therefore if you were pleased, then God is pleased. So this is their philosophy. You do not require to please God separately. So you were pleased by drinking wine, then God is pleased. So this is their explanation. Therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has condemned this Mayavadi philosophy. We all know there's one organization, so-called spiritual organization based in Calcutta, where they say Daridra Narayan. I personally was at a seminar a couple of years ago at the Bag Bazaar Gaudiya Mat, and surprisingly, they had like a day of various scholars and other personalities coming and giving short talks. So they'd asked me to write something on Achincha Beda Beda Tattva. So I did that. And then we went to the program and I read that out. But the first speaker that they had was this rascal from the Ramakrishna Mission, dressed in saffron robe. And then his first thing is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was God, so we're also God. And he's also an ordinary person, we're also ordinary people. So like this he was spreading his points. And the Gaudiya Mat members are sitting there, yes. I couldn't understand how they could invite such a person to come to one of their programs. You are God, I am God, we're all God, everything is one, everything is formless. It's going on and on. After I gave my talk, then one lady scholar from Calcutta University, she got up and the same thing. God is one, everything is everything is nothing. And this is what they preach. And unfortunately in Vrindavan, Krishna's birthplace, that's going on all the time. You get all these Mayavadis. Even amongst the ordinary people. One evening I was kind of sitting at the back of the temple in Vrindavan. And there were thousands of people going through because it was Kartik. So I was wondering, what are these people, you see them there praying very fervently. They offer big flower garlands, and not so much money, but flowers. What's going on in their heads? So I thought I'll pick out one person, and when he's finished his pujas and prayers, then I'll talk and find out. So there was one middle-aged guy who's praying away there at Gaura Sai's altar. Then he moved to Krishna Balaram. Then he moved to Radhashyam's altar. And then he started to head out. So I went over to him and I started talking to him. And I asked him, I said, what do you actually pray for when you're in front of the deities? So he said, this is just a preliminary. He said, I'm praying so that I can become one with everybody. So not even bothering about, praying for a car or a wife or this fellow's asking, I'm praying to God to make me God also. So this is what's going on. Therefore Prabhupada wanted us to preach. There are many other stories like that, but it's just a sample. Okay, so Prabhupada's saying the same thing. Sometimes I've seen this big Mayavadi. So therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has condemned this Mayavadi commentary. Prabhupada went on to say, they are very, very envious towards Krishna. Krishna is to Vibhuja Molidar, so Shama Sundar. And the Mayavadi explains that Krishna has no hand, no leg. So this is all imagination. How much offensive it is, they do not know. But to warn people like us, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has plainly warned, don't go to the Mayavadis. He said that the Mayavadis are to be found even here in Vrindavan, but they may not appear obvious to the untrained eye. So you should be very, very careful, he said. Don't go to hear from any Mayavadi. There are many Mayavadis in the dress of Vaishnavas. Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur has explained about them, that Eka Kali Chala Nake Tilak Galimala. Here is the follower of Kali. Although he's got tilak on his nose and neck beads, but still he's a Kali Chala. You've come to Vrindavan, so be careful, be very careful. Mayavadi Basya Sunilay. There are many Mayavadis here, many so-called tilak mala, but you do not know what is in the inside. But the great acharyas, they can find it out. So these people create a disturbance only. Therefore, we have to follow the Goswamis and the Goswami literature, especially the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which we have translated as the nectar of devotion. So every one of you should be very careful to read and make progress. Don't be victimized by the Mayavadis, so-called Vaishnavas. It is very dangerous. Okay, what time is it? 9:30. I'm just going to skip a few entries, just 1 minute. September the 6th, 1976, that was the appearance day of Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So I thought we'd read a little something from Prabhupada's comments there. So Prabhupada told us to observe a half-day fast. When I first joined the movement in 72, we didn't used to fast on Bhaktivedanta Thakur's appearance day. Later on, Prabhupada told us that we should do. So this is on the appearance day in 76. At about 4 a.m., Srila Prabhupada called in Harikesh Swami and myself into his room. He had just finished his writing and he was leaning back against the cotton-filled bolsters. There was no managerial topic to discuss. He just wanted to preach to us. Prabhupada did that sometimes. Normally on his party, we had a wire attached to a bell and a button, and anything Prabhupada wanted, he'd press the buzzer and we'd come running in from the next door. So usually, it was find me this, get that, like that. But sometimes Prabhupada just used to like to, ease back and preach. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, he called us in. He didn't want anything in particular. He just wanted to, he was so enlivened from his translation work during the night. You have to remember that 4 a.m. Prabhupada had already been up for 3 or 4 hours doing his work. But still he had this urgency to preach. Same thing in Hawaii. When we got there in May of 76, Prabhupada rang the buzzer at 1 o'clock in the morning. Myself and Pushta Krishna were there. So we went in and Prabhupada said he wasn't feeling well, so he wasn't going to go on his morning walk. And then as soon as he finished telling us that, he started telling us what he was translating on the Bhagavatam, and he even played back the tape a little bit so we could hear it. And he spent over an hour just preaching to us, and then sent us back to sleep again. So anyway, 4 o'clock. There was no managerial topic to discuss, he just wanted to preach to us. He told us that family life is the impetus for material advancement. He said that when he was a young man, he applied to become the agent for a very big chemical firm. The territory covered from Delhi to Benares, which is a large area worth many thousands of rupees in income. So their first inquiry to him was, "Are you a married man?" He was a young man, so they were thinking, if he's young, then he may not stick. So of course they don't want to hire somebody that tells you 3 months later, "Sorry, I'm going to go somewhere else." So Prabhupada said, this means that they know that if you are a married man, then there will be responsibility, and that will keep you. He went on to share some information about his own youth and marriage. His mother had planned to get him married by the age of 17, but she died when he was only 14, and so he ended up getting married at the age of 22. and his wife at that time was 11. So 11-year gap, twice as old. So this is the Vedic system, he explained. The man is married by the age of 25, and the girls are married between the age of 12 and 16. Early marriage means responsible citizens. Therefore, the parents arrange early marriages for their children in consultation with astrologers to see if the couple will be compatible. They took it that even if a boy was poor, if he was hard-working and from a good background, then he was acceptable. Prabhupada said that his grandfather's brother-in-law was very poor, but because he was a good worker, his mother-in-law secretly gave him 500 rupees, which was a large amount at that time, to begin a business. So he started a lace-making business and became a very rich man and prominent landowner in Calcutta, and they even ended up naming a road after him. So Prabhupada concluded with a laugh, good family life, that is the materialist desire. So that was Prabhupada's lecture on Bhaktivedanta Thakur's appearance day. And I'll find one other entry I wanted. So I think probably the most famous of Bhaktivedanta Thakur's songs is... Huh? No, I don't think Jaya Radhamadhava is one of Bhaktivedanta Thakur's songs. That's somebody else, yeah? Does any scholars here? No. I mean, this is something that we sing every day. What am I thinking of? No. No. We all sit down. We put out the leaf plates. Right. Sarirara Vijayajal. So we were having a room conversation. This was August the 22nd in Hyderabad, 1976. So one devotee, English devotee, he's dead now, but his name was Manihar. So he told Srila Prabhupada, or at least he started to say something, that when we give prasadam to people, then Prabhupada cut him off. And he said, anyone who comes, he must be given prasadam. So Manihara asked, well, what is the benefit that they get exactly? There have been so many concoctions. Oh, they'll take a human birth if they just eat a rasgulla, or they'll take this. So what is the actual benefit that a kami will get when he takes prasadam? So Prabhupada said, prasadam means the mercy of Krishna. So by eating, you were getting the mercy. Krishna Bodhadoyamai Koribara Jivajoy Swaprasad Anadilo Bhai. Swaprasad Anadilo Bhai. Say Prasad Anapau. Radha Krishna Gunagau. Pramedako Chaitanya Nitai. So Manihara continues on that, well, some people are singing something else. So again, Prabhupada says, Krishna Bodhadoyamai. Because we want to eat, so he is giving his mercy through eating. Eating, nobody will refuse. So by eating, he is being favored by Krishna. So this is the process. You understand Bengali? Krishna Bodhadoyamoi. He is very merciful. Koribari Jivajoy. So we're accustomed to eat. So we're accustomed to eat, to go to the restaurant, go to the hotel, go here and go there, at home, and so on. Simply eating and eating. So this is jivalampata, prostitution of the tongue. Just like a woman prostitute is not satisfied with only one man. Similarly, our tongues are like prostitutes. It is not satisfied with simple food. Sometimes here, sometimes there, sometimes on the street, sometimes in the restaurant, sometimes in a hotel. So all regular prostitution of the tongue. So there are the prostitution of three things: prostitution of the tongue, prostitution of the belly, and prostitution of the genital. Three kinds. Udarapasta vegam, a straight line, tongue, belly, genital. So to stop this prostitution is to control the tongue. The tongue prostitution means that he wants to eat varieties of foodstuff. So Krishna is so merciful. All right, you can eat varieties of prasad. Then the tongue prostitution is controlled, and naturally the belly and the genital are also controlled. Krishna Bodhidayamai Karibara Jiva Joy. To own victory over the tongue. So Krishna has given us various means. Therefore, such nice things should be offered to Krishna, and then we take prasadam, and we will be benefited. Manihara said, so this is Krishna's arrangement, special. So Prabhupada told him, yes, Jaya means that you conquer over the tongue. If you do not give the tongue Krishna prasad, then the tongue will dictate. So why not go to this restaurant? So this is the process. Give everyone nice prasadam, his tongue will be conquered, and he'll be conquered. He'll be able to conquer over the prostitution of the senses, and then he'll become a devotee. So that's the meaning of Sarirara Vijajo. Okay, it's getting very late. Okay, any questions or comments? Is there a feast today? There is. At noon?
Yeah, noontime there will be Pushpanjali 12.
Okay.
And then Kirtan Arati and 1:30 will be.
So at 12 o'clock?
Yeah, 12 o'clock is good.
All right, everybody got that? At 12 o'clock there'll be a program, Pushpanjali, and then Arati, and then after that prasadam will be served as well. Okay, good, very good, I'm sure. Bhaktivedanta Thakur is very pleased. All right, thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Praise Hari Sauri Prabhu ki jai.